All right, we are back for another lecture. We're going to be talking, I guess, technically finishing up the psychodynamic theories of personality. We talked about Carl Jung and Alfred Adler. Let's move on to letter D, Karen Horney. She believed culture played an important role in personality development, meaning like the culture that you're from, American culture, Chinese culture, South Korean culture, English culture. And she was very critical of Freud's view on female development. She felt like he only focused on the male side of things and didn't really actually spend time studying the women. And she argued that Freud's idea of penis envy was not the desire for the actual male organ, but rather their desire for social power and social status. Now, she came well after Freud, but what she means by this, I think she's probably got a point. For the longest time, men, and probably even in a lot of locations today, men are looked at being better workers, or men are worked at as being more superior when it comes to like the workforce. And so therefore a man, when you think of a big CEO of a company, you think of a man a lot of times. And that's what she's saying. She's like, listen, we didn't really actually want your male organ. What we'd rather desire is your social power and status that people automatically give you. And she even talked about womb envy, the unconscious desire to be able to have the ability to give birth. She even said that men have that. A lot of psychologists wouldn't really put much stock into that. I can tell you this just from my own experience. I have never ever desired to have a child. That just sounds horrible. I'm so thankful that my wife was willing to birth both of our children, because I don't think I'd want to go through that process. Number 5, she believed that healthy personality development depends on the fulfillment of the basic biological need of security that is provided through social interactions. Her viewpoint was, if a child is provided love and security by their parents, the result will be a healthy personality as an adult. If not, they may develop basic anxiety. So what she's saying is, I think, a very true statement. Think about it like this. If you grow up in an unstable home, maybe you don't know where your next meal is coming from. Maybe you don't know if mom and dad are coming home. There's constant arguing. There's abuse, verbal abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. If they do not provide that basic biological need of security, which you think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs is right there, then you as an individual will not have a healthy personality as an adult. You may develop basic anxiety. And her viewpoint of basic anxiety was the feeling of helplessness, loneliness, and fear created by the fact that the child is alone in a hostile world. See, a child, God has made us very unique in the fact that we have to be babied for a long time. You think about like the animal kingdom and how after a while they just kind of like, hey, you're on your own. We don't really do that. We have 18 years of parents raising children. And if a kid has basic anxiety, it's a feeling like I'm by myself and I have to do this on my own. Every once in a while you hear stories about, like kids that are from really bad homes where the older brother just has to take care of the younger siblings because mom and dad aren't around, or there's issues with jail time or drugs or alcohol or whatever. And that kid has to take the mantle. And when a kid does not have basic security, does not have basic love, fulfillment, then a lot of times they create basic anxiety, and it's just feeling of helplessness. Erik Erikson believed that development continued through the lifespan rather than ending at about age 5 or 6. This is where kind of Freud, kind of said, well, you kind of end about age 12 or 13. But what he did is he divided his theory of social development into 8 stages from birth to old age. We've talked about him earlier this year, so you might have to go back and review a little bit of Erik Erikson's stages. That was like the one that was like even included 60 to 80 and 40 to 60 and 20 to 40, that type of stuff. All right, let's talk about humanist theories of personality. Humanists believe that all humans are inherently good. And that's what you need to think of. When you think of the word humanism, think of people are good. We know as Christians that that is not true. The Bible says that the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked above all things, and that we crave sin. We crave fulfilling the lust of the flesh. But humanist psychologists emphasize the human capacity for goodness, for creativity, and freedom. Now you look at that and go like, that doesn't seem like a bad thing. Well, no, but what we're saying is humans aren't inherently good. Now, can humans be creative? Absolutely. Can humans show freedom and help other people with freedom? Oh, of course they can. But humanist number two sees humans as spiritual, rational, autonomous beings, meaning we don't work with anybody else, and emphasize the whole person rather than its component parts. They're looking at you as a whole. And they would say humans have a free will and can make their own choices in responding to situations. Now, they would say that the humans that have a free will, they're choosing good options. We would say as Christians that they don't choose good options. The only good option is Christ. And from there, if you dedicate your life to Him, then that will continue to lead to hopefully good options if you're walking with Him. But they believe that humans are striving for what they called self-actualization. That's the motive that drives people to reach their greatest potential, stealing a little bit from Maslow there. And self-actualization is, again, attaining that point where you feel like you're completely valuable and completely worth everything, and you've done exactly what you've tried to do. And the motive that drives people to reach their greatest potential could be anything. But that's what he says. The humanists would say we're striving for that. Now, Carl Rogers was one of the prominent humanist psychologists that believed in humanism. And what he talked about was what he called the self-concept. And it refers to all the unique beliefs and personality characteristics an individual has. For example, like you believe that you are talented. You believe you are intelligent. You believe that you are responsible. You believe that you are athletic. And that's your self-concept. So if I ask you, like, what qualities do you think you possess? What I'm asking for you is, what is your self-concept? Like, how does that work? How do you, what do you view about yourself? Maybe you like baking. Hey, I'm a really good baker. Or I like cooking. Hey, I'm really good at math. I'm really good at English. And it's a belief that you are talented, you're intelligent. It's just your self-concept. Now, could you have a bad self-concept? Of course you could. You feel like you're worthless, and that can lead to depression and these other issues like that. But one of the other things he talked about was something called congruence. Congruence is this. If the self-concept of an individual is consistent with what they actually experience, that is congruence. For example, if a person believes that they are athletic, and that person is successful in sports, they experience congruence. If you believe, I'm pretty good at basketball, and I just really feel like I can dribble, I feel like I can shoot, I feel like I can play good defense, and I feel like I can pass the ball really, really well. And then all of a sudden you get like all-state honors, you're like, okay, yeah, that kind of lines up with what I thought. That's congruence. Incongruence is if a person's self-concept is not consistent with reality and leads to a feeling of disappointment and eventual failure. If a person believes, this is an example, if a person believes that they are good at a particular subject in school, but they continue to fail tests, they will feel anxious and threatened and defensive and feel like they're failing and feeling like they're a disappointment. Think of it like this. I really, really love to spell. Some of you guys know this about me. I enjoy spelling words. I'm not really sure why. However, back in high school, I wasn't great at English. I was pretty good at spelling. But when people would ask me, what is one of your favorite subjects, I would kind of used to say English because I associated English with spelling. The problem is my grades in grammar, my grades in writing, and you guys that have heard me speak are like, yeah, no kidding, your grammar is horrible. But I would feel a sense of incongruence, meaning I would feel like, okay, I'm convincing myself that I'm good at English, but I'm really not. I'm only good at one component of English. And so it kind of made me have like a feeling of disappointment, almost a feeling of failure. Now, I never said I was good at math, and I wasn't really good at math, so that kind of led to exactly what my self-concept was. I was always decent in history. I could always memorize facts. But imagine if I was like, man, I'm a great historian, I love history, and then I fail everything. Well, it's just going to lead to incongruence. Now, conditions of worth are also associated with Carl Rogers. He said this: if the parents communicate the message to a child that he or she is valued only when they're doing what the parents want, then they will deny their true self in order to please the parents. Let me give you an example here, okay? If the kid really wants to go and be like an artist and wants to become like a portrait painter, and the parents like, no, you really, really need to be a doctor. You're smart enough to be a doctor. You can handle being a doctor. And the only time that the parents really show care, and the only time the parents show interest, is when the kid talks about the medical field, and they don't, and the kid does, and the kid's talking about art. They're just like, yeah, it's lame. That is conditions of worth, meaning your parents are putting your value on what they want from you. They're putting conditions of worth on you, like saying, if you do this, we will then have this. And so that's kind of how this would kind of work itself out. Now, you might be like, parents actually do this? Of course they do. And so what can happen is the child will deny their true self in order to please the parents. Okay, fine, I'm just going to go into the medical field. Well, what can happen then? Well, you're just miserable. You're a miserable doctor because you didn't really ever want to do this. It's because your parents wanted you to. Almost think of it like this. A lot of times you have kids that play sports all the way through because why? Mom and dad have wanted them to. And when the mom and dad show attention, buy them new stuff, and always come to their games, and then therefore the kid believes, well, in order to get my parents' affection, I have to do this. The parents have put a condition on worth. And the kid's like, well, I had a piano recital, and nobody, my mom and dad were both busy, and they hardly ever want me to practice piano. That's what we're talking about here. In order to develop a healthy personality, children and adults need to be surrounded by others who offer unconditional positive regard. Again, this is the humanist belief, although I would say some of the stuff I would agree with. But they would say that children and adults need to be surrounded by others who offer unconditional positive regard, meaning acceptance and appreciation of an individual, faults and all. And if that happens, and they are accepting and genuine and empathetic, they need to be surrounded by those type of people, and that will lead to success. This is why we would say this is part of the humanist, because they're saying that that makes you feel better. You have to have good self-confidence. This would be this would be a type of parent that a kid, struggles on a test, and the parent knows that the kid's not an A student, but says to the kid, hey, did you try your best? Did you truly study? Did you do this? And the kid says, yes, I did. Okay, the parent says, you know what? Then I love you, and you've done your best, and that's all I ask you to do. That is what we're talking about with unconditional positive regard. Acceptance and appreciation of an individual, faults and all. Your parents know you better than anybody. And what happens in the unconditional positive regard is they should be showing you constantly that they love you even though you mess up, even though you might come home way late after a curfew, even though you might violate the rules, even though you might not study, they still love you. Now, they're not going to push you to be better, but they're accepting and appreciation of you as an individual, faults and all. And that also leads to self-esteem, the amount that one values oneself for good or bad. This does have a large influence on personality, so we've already talked about this a little bit. And we would say characteristics can develop as a part of self-fulfilling prophecy. Again, if a teacher says, man, I think this kid's really smart, you might attain to that level and build up your self-esteem because the teacher has self-fulfilled that prophecy inside you and kind of convince you that you can do it. We'll stop there because we're going to go to Abraham Maslow. We've already kind of gotten him, talk about him, and done with that section.